This week we are switching gears and we are talking about something that is not on Islam, but on Muslims themselves. Inspirational stories of Muslims. And these stories, of course, I get to select them. And I want to mention some of the basis in which I've done that. I've tried to select stories that have young people in it, that have old people in it. I've selected stories that have stories from different nationalities. I've selected stories of people of different levels of Iman and faith. I've selected stories that is in the time of the Prophet ﷺ and present day. And I've selected stories of men and women as well. I have deliberately not selected stories of scholars because their life is inspirational, but I want these stories where we can relate with them. They're ordinary folks, and so we can identify with their struggle and their effort as we are like that. Usually people, all of us, there's certain kind of motivation we get to do good deeds. For some of us, we get motivated to do something based on our reality facing us. So if we are facing a very difficult situation, then our good deeds chip in. When we had COVID, you had people coming, Muslims rising to the challenge, delivering vaccines, delivering masks, sharing food. So people sometimes get motivated by the reality facing them. Sometimes you get motivated by your faith, the Iman, that with the promise that Allah says, if you do good, Allah will reward it. That where if you do an atom's weight of good, you will see it. Some people get motivated by their desire to make a difference in the world before they pass away, to leave a legacy, to leave something that will benefit humanity. And so their motivation comes from that. There are other people who feel they were born with a life calling, that they want to, that they were designed to do this particular thing. And so they pursue that with passion. Whatever the reason, we find among the Muslims so many inspirational stories of the lives of people, ordinary people, and how they live. And I want to be able to let us know that some of these people, they're necessarily, their Iman might not be of a high level. They may not even be practicing Islam fully, but they are driven by something that caused them to do some good deeds. And I want that to be part of our conversation because I want us to understand that you don't have to be a scholar of a Maulana to make a difference. And every one of us, we have already begun to make a difference by just attending this class. And I hope that we will increase and do more than this as we go along, inshallah. So let's look at some of these stories of these folks here. But I want to preface it with this beautiful ayah. This is such an important verse that Allah mentioned in the Quran. And for the sake of time, I'm just going to read the English. And among the believers are those who have remained true to the covenant they made with Allah. Among those, some of them have fulfilled their vow, and others await the appointed time. They have not changed the least. All this in order that Allah may reward the truthful for their truthfulness, and either punish the hypocrites, or if He so wills, accept their forgiveness. Verily Allah is most pardoning, most compassionate. This ayah is telling us that they are among the believers, these special people who have committed. They remain true to the covenant of being a true believer, and they strive to fulfill that covenant, that vow that they make. And some have done it, and there are others in the line waiting to do this. And so we fall into one of these two categories. Either we have accomplished already many things to show and establish that we are people of piety, or we are awaiting to be able to do that in our lives. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in these beautiful verses acknowledges that. So our first story comes from Washington, D.C. And there's this brother by the name of Qazi Manan. He's the owner of Sakina Halal Grill. And he was born in Pakistan, about 50 years old. And what he did, he recognized that the situation around where the Sakina Grill was, there was a lot of homeless people. And so he wanted to do something to make a difference. But what he did was really incredibly extraordinary. Instead of just cooking food and taking it to the homeless on the streets, he invited them into his restaurant to sit among the other guests that was there, disheveled, at the expense of losing customers. He would bring them in, 15 to 20 every day would come by, and he would provide food for them. And he would treat them like if they're paying guests. In fact, most of the people sitting there did not know that these were not paying, because the way he treated them. And he cooked the food and he treated them and gave them free food. This extraordinary act of this brother, of course, created a huge, the homeless people around him, they began to like value this and recognize how beautiful this brother was. And then on Sundays, on his day off, he would cook a whole bunch of food and go down to the homeless places and deliver food itself. And so what happened was when COVID hit, his restaurant started to tank. And it became really bad that he began to lose money, he began to lose people. He was about to close shop, and he had to resort to, what do you call it? GoFundMe. You know, I had to kind of beg for money, basically. And because of what he had done, you know, he wanted to raise $250,000, and the GoFundMe raised over $237,000. He feeds roughly 16,000 people a year. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused this business to continue to thrive. He says that everything he does is from Allah because he thinks his mission is from Allah, and so he has to do that. And may Allah reward this kind brother. And if you go to Washington, D.C., take a visit to Sakina Halal Grill, inshallah. The second story is about people who walk the Hajj. Now, this is a really weird, strange, extraordinary thing. You know, we're told that Hajj is obligatory on you if you can afford to go. But there lies the problem. What does afford mean? And so for some of us, we have to make sure we get all the money in the bank, all of everything, and all the T's and I's dotted before we make that decision. We have to make sure we get vacation, everybody's well in the family, and we make a lot of excuses of why we're not ready to go to Hajj. Afford for Saeed was that I have the health, I have the ability to walk. You know what? I don't think I fall under that category of not affording to go to Hajj. And so this man sits in South Africa and decides, you know what? I'm going to walk to Hajj. Imagine this kind of a mindset of a person. It took him 3 years to do this. You know, he got stopped by COVID. He passed through Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Kenya, Sudan, Egypt, Palestine. Then he had to spend almost a year with COVID lockdown in Palestine. They closed the place down. Then eventually he was able to go to Jordan. And then he finally ended up in Mecca. You know, may Allah accept his Hajj. To see the decision made by a person like this is truly extraordinary. And he's not alone. Adam Muhammad, you know, this is the most recent case, walked from London, British Iraqi, all the way to Mecca. Shihab from India walked 280 days all the way from India to Hajj. And so we see these amazing people. There was another brother from Algeria, and they just walked to Hajj. Now, think of this, you decide to walk to Orlando, you know, just to make that decision, it's difficult to walk all the way to Hajj. And so it really tells you that when you decide that you want to do the work of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no matter what it takes, you are there and you're making that effort, you know. And so they had to go through all these difficulties, but they had the niyyah and the sincerity, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed them with the result. and they were able to make the Hajj. So when you make that decision that I want to do something for Allah, no matter how extraordinary or impossible it may seem, you say Bismillah and you take a step forward, Allah says, وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَل لَّهُ مَخْرَجًا. When you have taqwa and you decide to go forward, Allah will open a door for you from a place you never thought. He will make a path for you to make it happen. And we ask Allah to inspire us in similar ways. The third story I want to talk about is about Nadir and Yadira. Sorry, let me talk about Zainab first. I wanted to include Zainab because I wanted to celebrate her life, and I wanted all of us to know about the sister. If you look at the age when she was born, 1917, very early. And at 18, she founded one of the most amazing organizations, Muslim Women's Association. She was invited by the Muslim Brotherhood, was active at that time in Egypt. She became very organized. Her organization had over 3 million members. She was a da'iyah or an activist from since she was young, all the way. Her whole life was spent serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She used to deliver weekly lectures. And when she had lectures at the Ibn Tulun Masjid, it drew over 3,000 people. In Ramadan, like 5,000 people would come to her lectures. And so she used to have her weekly lectures. She published a magazine. She maintained an orphanage. She offered assistance to poor families and mediated family disputes. And then when Gamal Abdel Nasser decided to arrest and jail all the Muslim activists, they rounded her up as well. And she was jailed for 25 years. After 11 years, Anwar Sadat took over Egypt, and so he released her. But her life in prison during those 11 years was the most horrific description of torture and inhumane behavior that was to be meted out to a human being. You know, and she wrote a book called Return of the Pharaoh, which you can buy, detailing what she went through in those prisons. You know, and what she endured just because she was a Muslim, an activist Muslim in a country that is supposed to be a Muslim country. She wrote many other books and articles, and her life is truly a testament of how active Muslims live and how they dedicate themselves. And no matter what confront them, they remain patient and they remain striving. And I wanted to introduce her life to you, and I wanted to encourage you to get to know about her. Zainab al-Ghazali, and the book I think is on Amazon, and if you want to know more about her, you can do so. But she is truly an inspiration of a sister who, incredible what she built and the organization that she built. We look now at Nadir and Yadira. You know, this is a blind couple. They're considered legally blind. And part of the problem that happens when you're blind is that there are many things that the way the society treats you, is very unfortunate. You know, so when they had their first son, Abdullah, the nurse became very concerned, as they do with blind parents, of how will this child be looked after. And the nurse was threatening that she will call the authorities to take away their child because the nurse felt that they were not able to look after their own child. And they had to threaten to sue the nurse. They had to get the Muslim community involved, and they had to fight really hard to keep their own son that was born to them because they were blind. And then when they looked for copies of the Quran, his wife Yadira was actually a convert. And so they began to look for, there's a lot of Braille. Braille is a language of the blind. It's a way in which the letters are raised over the page. And so the blind people, they would pass their fingers over these letters, right? And they would be able to read like that. So there's an alphabet for the blind. And so they would learn those alphabet, and then when they pass their fingers over those dots, they could be able to read. So there were many books in Braille, in Arabic. There's Braille. People can recite Quran in Arabic, but it was not a good English translation. And so they found themselves really in a problem here. And instead of sitting and saying, we hope so one day somebody will write an English translation of the Quran, they were not scholars, but they decided that they are going to make an English translation of the Quran in Braille. And so they formed the organization called Islam by Touch, and they began to find ways to produce Qurans in Braille. The cost is very expensive. The printer to write Braille is almost $5,000 for one of the printers. So it was a very expensive enterprise. Even the paper is a special paper you have to buy that costs 10 times the regular type of paper. So it's a very costly affair. And they were able to produce this Quran at $250 each. It's 10 volumes. And they have distributed almost 450 of them all over the world. And their goal is to put one of these Quran in every masjid in America and hopefully the whole world. And so Nadir travels on Fridays. He would go to different parts of the country and he would deliver khutbahs and try to spread the word that they are trying to make this mission of producing a Braille Quran in every masjid. We were very fortunate in that when we heard of this, we invited him to Nur al-Islam, my masjid. He came, he delivered a khutbah, and he gifted us one of these Braille Quran. I hope it's still in the office somewhere. So we're supposedly supposed to have it in the office, one of these Braille Quran, 10 volumes. And so this project of these two people is incredible. Now, he also is not only doing Quran, they're producing other kinds of literature, and he also is trying to raise awareness to Muslims and others of how to treat the blind. Part of the problems they have is, for example, when you see a blind person, we tend to think that they are not independent. And so we rush to find a way to help them. If they're crossing the road, we want to go hold their hand and let them cross. So we don't allow them in the homes, everywhere. We don't allow them to find their independence. And so he said, that's a problem because you're providing crutches for them when they don't ask for it. So he said, you should always ask the blind person before you assist them if they need help. Then they have guide dogs, and the taxi drivers, the Uber drivers and so on, they don't refuse to have them come in their taxis because they have their dogs. So they get rejection. They also have a lot of pushback that blind people should not get married because they're not capable of leading independent lives. And so especially the sisters are discouraged completely. And so their lives become resigned to one of celibacy. They live alone, lonely, in depression, isolated. They're not allowed to participate in having regular lives. And so Islam by Touch seeks to create and to change all of this dynamic. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless their effort. It was an incredible opportunity for us to meet this couple and to be able to introduce ourselves to them. And we ask Allah to continue to bless their work, inshallah. I said some people are driven by a calling. One such person is Parween Saeed. This sister is absolutely incredible. She actually felt that from the very early days of her life, that I want to be a very simple person and I want to help people. She moved to the poorest part in Karachi, one of the poorest villages in Karachi called Sojani, which is a very poor town. And she began feeding 1,000 people every day. She's been doing so for the past 16 years. This sister has a bachelor's and a master's in journalism. And after getting married and getting her daughter, she just said, I wanted to get away from all of this rich life and to just live a humble life. She actually abandoned her career and focused on helping people around. She saw many of the people in that town could not afford 2 meals a day. But what moved her really was that she saw a mother who had to kill her own 2 children because she could not afford to feed them. And that really, really had an impression on her ween. She said, my mind couldn't accept that a mother's heart could do such a thing. And so she went and she spoke to the mother. And the mother said, if you were in my place, you would do the same. And that stuck in her mind. And she said, you know what? I have got to do something. And so she ganged up with her husband and they started Khana Ghar. I think this means like eating house, to provide meals. And she charged 3 rupees for the meal because she said she wanted them to have a sense of dignity, because when you give people free things, they don't value it. And so she charged really a pittance to be able to allow people to come and eat. And she don't discriminate. Muslim, Christian, Hindu, everybody comes. And she has been doing this every day, feeding 1,000 people for the past 16 years. And now she's looking to expand into other areas as well. So Allah puts in people's hearts a certain calling, and it's absolutely incredible that you, with all her qualification, having a master's in journalism, could have had a life of just, doing that. Decided that, what, helping the people around me was more important than anything else. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again to bless her effort. Truly, and these are people, as I'm telling you, ordinary people, just driven by something to want to do goodness. We also look now at Palestine. Palestine, when you have to understand the Gaza. It's an extraordinary place. It's almost like 1 million people living in a small area, really, really one of the most porous and terrible condition place. The last war that Israel had with them, 17,000 buildings were destroyed, 17,000 homes. You can't even conceptualize 17,000 homes. Think of every block have 10 homes. So we walking around in Florida here, we have 10 blocks. That's, 10 blocks is one corner. 10 houses in one block, for example. So you have 10 houses in one block, 10 blocks would be 100 homes. You can't even figure out 17,000 homes destroyed. And what is it? Reduced to rubble. So it's concrete, rubble, and ash everywhere, dust. This is the Mashharawi. She was 24. She graduated from the Islamic University of Gaza. She was an engineer. And she decided, rather than sit there and be depressed, that she needed to do something. And she came up with an extraordinary idea. That she got the name, decided to make a concrete block out of the rubble, the ash and rubble around her. When she had brought this idea to some of the people, some of the men, they said, why you don't go in the kitchen and make a cake? They dismissed her. And so when she had this block, she called it the green cake. She was featured on the BBC World Service. Her block, which went through 200 different iterations to make sure it was the proper strength structurally, that it had all this stuff that is required to make a block to build a big structure. And she did it so well that she won in the Innovation Prize in Japan. And she was designated one of the most creative people in 2018 by the Fast Company media outlet. She had a documentary done about her on the BBC. And she said, it feels like you're doing something for your country. You're not just shouting and saying we want to be free. She said, you're not just seen as victims. We can build. We are our future. The optimism of the youth. instead of sitting there and doing nothing, created this amazing block, which went to Japan and won patents and won awards. So this is the power of using your mind instead of sitting and doing nothing. And so I wanted to also acknowledge and celebrate and recognize the sister instead of doing anything. And she has a lot of rubble and a lot of ash to last her for years and years and years to come. And from these blocks, will be built buildings again, and we built homes, and we'll make a difference in the world. And then we go to Syria. This place, Syria, which, Assad has destroyed, the Russians have bombed it. I mean, the amount of rubble and chaos that have happened in Syria, raising on the largest humanitarian aid required, most refugees, so many bad things have happened. And among this place, you have few people who wanted to do something. I wanted to celebrate the efforts of a few artists who sat in their home and said, what do we do to make a difference? And so Akram Swaidan came up with the idea because he saw trauma in the eyes of the kids, because they're surrounded by bombs and shrapnel and all kinds of stuff. And so he said, you know what? I'm going to begin gathering these shrapnel and I'm going to paint beautiful paintings out of them. And he called it Painting on Death. And his work was so amazing. It received worldwide acclaim. He took all of these shell casings, rocket casings, missile debris, empty bullet cartridges, and other weapons that was in the city and the villages, and made amazing artwork out of them. And his work was internationally famous. He went and participated in several art exhibitions in Europe, US, the Gulf region. So this small little effort, he was able to make a difference in his little homeland. There's another sister, Amani Zanke. She also wanted to do something to make a difference. And so she decided to show the human cost of the Syrian war. And so she began to paint women who were oppressed and had violence against them, and begin to make that message of showing that, out of that violence, hopefully some light can come out of it, the message of light. And so she had her work also, highlighting that. Then we had Aziz Al-Asamar, and he replaced his canvas. He used to paint on regular canvas, and he decided to go out among the debris. The walls became his canvas. And so he would paint giant paintings on the rubble and the big giant walls, depicting the atrocities that was going on. Where, for example, one baby girl was crushed. He painted that baby and trying to highlight the destruction and chaos that Assad regime was doing to the people in Syria. And so these people found a way to be able to give expression to what would have been a very great tragedy, and what is a very great tragedy. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ignites your soul to make a difference, you find a way. From out of your own reality, you create a way as a way of helping. And so he does that painting. And then we come back to the States and we look at another story, which I want to mention, of a young boy, 7-year-old, second grader, from Virginia. At 4, he had an emergency surgery to remove a tumor from his abdomen. And he's still taking treatment for that tumor. And he came up with an idea, because when he was in a hospital, back and forth, he realized that the frontline workers needed equipment and they were not able to get them. So he decided, I want to start doing something about that. So he came up with the idea to approach hotels and motels and ask if they have any extra shower caps that he can use so he can give to the frontline workers. And it turned out that the hotels and motels had a large stock of not only shower caps, they gave him gloves, face masks. And so he would regularly go to these places and collect. And he ended up collecting over 6,000 personal protective equipment for healthcare workers. And he distributes them to the local hospitals. You know, this is a 7-year-old second grader who is driven by a desire to want to make a difference. So it doesn't matter what age you are. Once Allah has placed in your heart that I need to do something, you know, you find a way. And so as he goes to school and lives his life, Allah has placed in his heart this generosity and this desire to make a difference. And we ask Allah to cause him to grow up to be one of the leaders of the Muslims, inshallah. You know, and this beautiful young man. The other story is about Bizik. This is an extraordinary person. He's a 63-year-old US national from Libya. And what he does, kids who have been determined that they're terminally ill and they are left to die, sometimes those kids get abandoned by their parents and their loved ones because they are basically left just to die. You know, they have been determined that they don't have too long to live. And so a lot of the loved ones, they don't want to take on that headache. So they abandon them. He takes them in. You know, he goes to the hospital, he arranges, and he collects those kids and he takes care of them. In their last days of life, he takes care of them. You know, he had over 80 of them. And he gets to take care of them. It's very expensive. He has to pay for their medicines, make sure that they are okay, find food for them. Some of them, they don't even know their names. He gives them names. He gives them Muslim names and he raised them like Muslims. And the LA Times, you know, recognize him. And he's been doing this for years, since 1989, you know, and quietly doing this act of incredible care and kindness. And he relates how difficult it is when these kids die in his hands. He said 10 of them died. I was holding them when they died. You know, there was one Mexican girl, she was just a month old, he said, and she died after living 2.5 years with him. He took her on when she was a month old, but she managed to live for 2.5 years. And he said when she died, he cried for 3 nights and 3 days straight. He said it was very difficult to experience this little kid who he had at home for almost 2 years. And so Bizik is a very devoted Muslim, and he spends his time doing this. You know, he has now been recognized by the Turkish president. They are doing a Turkish documentary film on him. He and his wife are now participating in this project. And according to LA Times, he is the only person that is actually doing this. It's the only house in LA that actually takes in kids that are going to die. You know, what an extraordinary person to make a decision to put yourself through that kind of life, you know, where you're going to be seeing death around you every moment, but the love for the children and the love for these kids who has no one. Allah sent him almost like an angel, you know, and he's a very devout Muslim. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give him Jannah, to really bless his effort. You know, he can only be doing this because he believes in Allah and trusts that this is the right thing to do. You know, so we salute this brother and his wife, who's now part of this team, and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to continue to bless him. Then we go to Indonesia, I think it is. And this sister, subhanAllah, you know, Ibu Maria Marghani Muhammad. She is 104 years old. Now, all of us as Muslims, we have this desire to make Hajj. because we are told it is one of the 5 pillars of Islam, and that we are obligated to make Hajj as long as you could afford it. And as I said, afford is subjective. A lot of people think they can't afford, and they can, and they don't go. Allah don't invite them. That's why we said the people who go to Hajj are truly called the guests of Allah. That Allah is the one who invites you to his house. Not everybody gets there. There are people who can go, who can afford to go, but Allah did not invite them. So their hearts does not come to the decision that I want to go to Hajj. And then there are others who have nothing, but they are determined to go there because Allah calls them to his house, and they walk there if necessary. This sister, at 104 years, you would have imagined that she would have every year of her life, from since she had sense, know that I am trying to make Hajj. And there she is saving year 50, year 51, year 52, year 53, desiring every year to go to Hajj. And as she's getting older, the realization dawns on her that my chances are getting lesser and lesser. Yet at 90, she got an opportunity to go to Umrah. And she went. At 90 years of age, when most of us would have said, my chance has passed, she went. And after experiencing Umrah, you would have also said, okay, I made Umrah, at least I made Umrah. I'm satisfied. In fact, it made her more determined. And when she finally got the chance, at 104 years of age, she made her journey to Hajj. And she landed in Jeddah, and she said, Alhamdulillah, I'm going to Mecca. Alhamdulillah, I'm going to Hajj. The Indonesian official said she was in good health and would be able to perform her Hajj rituals without any problems. Not only was she desiring to go to Hajj, she kept her health strong enough to be able to make the journey. We ask Allah to accept from her this, and inspire us who may not have gone yet and who keep making excuses of why we can't make it, that this sister would inspire us to go. This sister became internationally famous, Malala Yousafzai, and she used to live in the Swat Valley. And in 1997, her father had a girls' school. He was a school teacher, and they used to run a girls' school. And when the Taliban took over in Afghanistan, they stopped all education for girls. So every person who was going to school, girls, her father was a private school. And when she heard of they stopping this, she spoke out against it. She actually wrote a letter to the BBC protesting of what's happening in Afghanistan and that people should do something about it. And she irritated the Taliban. And so they issued an order, go kill this girl. So while she was traveling on the school bus one day, man came into the bus and asked, who is Malala? And they pointed at her, and he took his gun and he shot her in the head. And they thought the problem had gone away. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you are strong and you are brave, Allah has a way of doing things that sometimes we don't understand. She fell in a coma. She was rushed out of the country. 10 days, she was in a hospital in England, didn't wake up. And then after multiple surgeries and rehab, she finally was able to recover. Her family, of course, had to leave Afghanistan because for fear of their lives. And the British government gave them citizenship. And so they ended up in England. You would have thought that this sister would have had enough. After almost dying as a result of this, that this would be enough for her. But Malala was just beginning. And so she became very, very active in promoting girls' education. she became the youngest Nobel laureate to win that Nobel Prize. She was a fierce advocate for girls' education. And she traveled to many countries and she would give speeches, including the United Nations, advocating the fight for girls' education. Not only that, for poverty, that poverty, wars, child marriage, gender discrimination, basically fighting for young women to get an opportunity to be able to allow them to reach the highest level of their potential. And she was young. And while she's doing that, she's also going to school. And then she eventually went to Oxford University, in which she graduated. And she got so many awards, almost 50 awards of all kinds of things. She won a Grammy for her audiobook. She has 2 honorary doctorates. I think there are more doctorates she has from university in Canada, in different places. Awards upon awards. She's very, very articulate and passionate about her cause. She started her own federation, fund. And so she goes around trying to help people. In one of our fundraisers in Guyana, in Nur Islam, we actually tried to invite her to be a guest speaker at our program. So we contacted her parents in England to invite her to come and talk at the Nur Islam fundraiser. But unfortunately, her dad said that she's right now studying for exams in school and she's not traveling, would not be able to come. So we were not able to get her to come. She finally wrote the book, I Am Malala. And as you can see how she's dressed, she's not necessarily, completely Islamic in her attire. And so when she wrote the book, she was very open about some of the things which people do in Pakistan, and she was critical of some of the things that was happening. And so after the book came out, which won all kinds of awards, the All Pakistan Private School Federation announced that they would ban the book. It would ban it in all of its 152 member institutions, that it has a negative connotation for Islam. In other words, they interpreted that whatever she wrote was not positive about Islam, was actually negative. And so they banned the book, and the Taliban, of course, issued a death threat again, renewed a death warrant for her. In fact, they threatened any bookstore that sells this book, they're going to have probably burn the bookstore down. And they reissued a death warrant for her. She continued to thrive and continued to do amazing work. And I Am Malala is on sale. She now have a children version of it. And she has several other books now, which she is coloring books and different kinds of, because her focus is young people. And so she continues to be an advocate and a tremendous Muslimah who is striving to let the world know that women matter and that we need to educate our young women. We ask Allah to protect her and to allow her to continue to do her work. As I said, she's a controversial figure. And so you'll have people on both sides, some people who feel that Malala is just being used by the West as an agent and they're just using her to, attack Islam and so on. So you'll have different controversial point of view. But I wanted you to know about her because she's truly an extraordinary young woman. And whether you fall on which side of the debate, the work she has done certainly will improve lives of Muslim sisters all over the world. The other story I wanted to mention today is about Noah. I think we probably have a video on it.
North Texas jewelry store worker stunned, literally, a woman who was trying to simply sell a gold necklace, but he refused to buy it.
It's what he did instead that is being celebrated around the world tonight. Our Jeff Paul with a video only on CBS 11.
A mother of 2 walks into this Dallas area jewelry store ready to part with something dear to her heart. Bills are due and mouths need to be fed.
It seemed like she was sad and there's a tears in her eyes.
Noah says this woman was trying to sell a gold necklace given to her by her mother.
I let her tell me how much she wants to sell it, and I gave her exactly what the money she wanted.
Noah not only dug into his own pocket to give her cash, he gave back the necklace.
I didn't think about it, just I grabbed the money and gave it to her.
The woman, astonished, embraces Noah, wiping tears from her eyes.
If I had her number, I'll call her back and see if she needs more money or she needs more help.
What you don't realize, Noah is a Syrian refugee seeking asylum with his family after escaping their civil war-embattled homeland. He shared this clip with one friend back home, never realizing it had become a viral video.
I feel better, that's enough, better than a lot of money.
Noah says he was just trying to help out someone who needed a hand, crediting that kind of generosity for getting him and his family to America and keeping them alive.
It doesn't matter who religion you are, it doesn't matter where you're from. This is our humanity. Everybody should do that.
In Dallas, I'm Jeff Paul, CBS 11 News.
So, you know, Noah didn't want to reveal his name or his face or how much he gave that woman also, but he says he wouldn't mind meeting her again just to see how she's doing.
So we have people among us, you know, who, this is a Muslim whose heart melted because he saw someone in need. We are taught in our religion that when you see someone in need, if you can help, you help. And it doesn't matter what religion they belong to. You know, so Noah was driven by this act of kindness. He himself is an employee and he just helped her to, with the necklace, you know, to pay her bills. These small acts of kindness is what differentiates the believer from the disbeliever. You know, that we are grounded in trying to do acts of kindness without any expectation of reward. And it's interesting what he said, that, you know, if you could contact her and find if she needs more money, you'll find a way to get more money for her. That's the generosity of the Muslim. You know, so Noah's act of kindness is something I think which we should laud and appreciate and hopefully emulate. I have two last stories, and that they came from the time of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So Anas ibn Malik related, we were sitting with the Messenger of Allah, and I think I've told this story already in one of the classes. And the Prophet said, coming upon you now is a man of paradise. In other words, they were sitting and he said, around that corner they're coming, they're going to be a man of paradise. What an extraordinary thing to say. So they're sitting there, and then a man from the Ansar came, bare, disheveled by the water of the ablution he was thinking. He was carrying both shoe in his hand, and then he passed. The next day the Prophet said, coming to you is a man of paradise. Same man came. Third time, same man came. So Abdullah bin Amr became intrigued. This is a man of paradise? I want to see what makes him so special. What is it that about him that the Prophet is saying he's a man of paradise? I need to see what is it he has accomplished. You know, I've never heard of him. And so he made an excuse and he told the man that he had a little dispute with his father and that he needed a place to stay. He wanted to find a way to go and stay by the man. And he entered his home. The man allowed him to come in, and 3 days he stayed with the man. And he observed him. He followed him day and night, watching what he's doing, because he wanted to see what is it so extraordinary about this man. And he stayed for 3 days and 3 nights. He never saw the man get up to pray, any night prayer. Man went to bed, woke up in the morning, nothing. After 3 days, Abdullah turned to the man and said, you know what? I came really on the pretext to see Allah's messenger had said that you are a man of paradise. And I was trying to find out, what is it that you do that is so special? And the man says, I don't know. You know, I am what you see, I am. And Abdullah says, okay. And then he tried to leave. Then the man said, maybe one thing. He said that, except that I do not find dishonesty in my soul towards Muslims. My fellow Muslim brothers and sisters, I am never dishonest with them. I don't envy anyone because of the good that Allah has given them. So he was not dishonest and he don't have envy for others. And Abdullah says, that is what maybe we have achieved. And that is why the Prophet says, you're a man of paradise. And this story illustrates that none of us know what good deed that we do, what simple good deed we do will be accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be the result for our paradise. That is why whenever you can do any good deed, don't postpone it, don't shortchange yourself, do that good deed. Because in that moment is the moment that you require to do that deed. If you postpone it tomorrow, you may not be around tomorrow. A lot of times we, for example, want to call mom or call this relative or make up with somebody, and we delay, we postpone, and then it never happens. And so this brother gets up every day, make sure he's not dishonest, make sure he doesn't envy one for what they have. And the Prophet said that man will be given paradise because of that. And we ask Allah to make our good deeds also merit paradise. And my last story is about a very famous story. It's about Uwais al-Qarni, and I'll try to speed it up because I notice our time is running. So Uwais lived in Yemen, and his father died young when he was young, and he used to take care of his mother. And then he got leprosy. And Allah cured his leprosy because and except for one small coin-sized piece of his flesh. And he used to look at this piece of flesh and remind himself that Allah cured him. And then one day, a group of companions of the Prophet visited Yemen, and they visited him, and he accepted Islam. And what the Prophet went to tell the companions, he never met the Prophet, but the Prophet knew of his situation. And he would tell his companions that there is Uwais, this man, he treats his mother extremely well and is obedient to her. That was his quality. He treats his mother well, obedient to her. And the Prophet says, if you ever have the opportunity to meet Uwais, ask him to make dua for you. That was the honor in which the Prophet gave, and status the Prophet gave to this man, telling the companions of Rasulullah, if you ever meet Uwais, who never met the Prophet, that let him make dua for you. Because why? Allah accepts his dua. Umar ibn Khattab sitting listening to this. And Umar is amazing. Umar says, I have to meet this man. I need that forgiveness. A man like Umar ibn Khattab. And so every time people come from Yemen, he would ask them, do you know Uwais? Have you heard of Uwais? Constantly, he would interrogate people. The man who had leprosy, one coin size was not fixed. He takes care of his mom. He would keep asking. And then Umar did not give up. Years passed, and every time Umar got an opportunity, he would ask for people. And then finally, they said yes. Uwais was going to make the pilgrimage. And they said, yes, here is Uwais. And Umar al-Khattab went to him and said, and explained that the Prophet ﷺ said, if you should meet Uwais, ask him to make dua for you. Uwais was taken aback. He said, and he was like really strange, found it very strange that Umar is making this request. Umar insisted until Uwais asked Allah to forgive him. And then Umar tried to do something nice for him and said, he's going to Iraq. Let me give you a letter introducing you to the governor of Iraq. Uwais says, no, I just want to be, a regular guy. I don't need no introduction to the governor. I just want to remain anonymous among the believers and to live my life. And this story I want to illustrate how determined Umar ibn Khattab is to find every moment of goodness that he can get. Umar's resume speaks for itself. Yet, when he heard of an opportunity to have a man who the Prophet says, you go ask him for forgiveness, Umar ibn Khattab was diligent to find that good deed, to find a way to get to that. A lot of us, we have opportunity to do so many good deeds, and we pass on it. We're not as determined in it. We give up very easily. A little difficulty and challenge reach us, and we just ready to quit. So these stories, I hope, inspire us. They are in our masjid, in our community, many, many amazing people. And you are men sitting here tonight, Many of you are amazing people in your own right. I have a brother in my community who he donates gallons of blood. I think he's up to 29 to 30 gallons of blood that he has donated in his lifetime. There's a brother who, for example, I have never, ever asked him to do anything and he ever refuses. No matter what it is, I could call him 3 o'clock in the morning, day or night, and ask him to do something, and he will be there. We have these amazing people in our community. There's a brother who feeds the cats. We used to have over 25 cats in the masjid. And every day, twice a day, he would buy feed and feed those cats. So we have incredible people among us, and some of you also are incredible people. But I ask you to continue to don't shortchange yourself. We have very little life to live. Life is so short. Every day you wake up, try to find a way to be motivated to do some good deed before the end of the day. There's a hadith which says everybody begins the day like a vendor for their own soul. You will either make good business today or you'll make bad business. Let each day that Allah has blessed you with, don't let it go without trying to do something of goodness. So when you go to sleep at night, you can say, how was my day today? And be satisfied that I did make an effort to try to do something of goodness. I hope these stories of incredible people, I didn't quote stories of scholars because I didn't want you to feel they are unreachable. I quoted regular folks who found a way to make a difference. And I ask Allah to make it easy for all of us to find a way to make a difference as well. Assalamu alaikum.